So we decided to open this talk with a little reflection. Is that okay for everybody? Great. I was considering how to start this for a little bit, and I landed on the thought that there are no original ideas. And so, as we sit here today, our idea was inspired by giants, and some of them are here with us today, like Rachel. But also, and I think I saw Hamilton Morris run around somewhere earlier, but when we think about this, in the 70s, Ram Dass and Timothy Leary started this crazy thing, and Rick Doblin sued the DEA. Is that crazy? And so thanks to these dreamers and believers who put their freedom and safety at risk to help people get better, we are able to sit here today and come back where we're coming back from Washington yesterday or last week, and we're talking to an administration that is positive towards that, and it is positive because there's a need, and that need is being recognized. And so I think that we're likely going to have our first FDA approval this year. Isn't that amazing? And I think we should recognize these dreamers who allowed us to dream a little bit and manifest from believer to scientists to business people, something beautiful that was destined to make the world a little bit better than we left it. There's someone in particular also that I would like to acknowledge, and this is a little personal, but I think he deserves it, and he's not here with us today. But my psychiatrist, Dr. Jeffrey Gus, some of you know him and some of you do not, was also one of those giants. And he did 44 years of clinical work. He was one of the spearheads of the psilocybin trials at NYU. And mostly, he helped me. And the help that he gave me inspired me to leave finance and go study psychology. And the reason why we're sitting here today is because he showed me what good looked like in terms of care. And so when I had that healing experience with him, I wanted to share it with the world. And yesterday, Jeff informed me that he's deciding to retire, and I'm blessed. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that part of the reason we're all sitting here now is because he showed me how I could heal myself. So I think we should applaud him. So I'm not going to keep this going too long, but one thing that I will share is that we are in a moment with FDA approval. And Greg here was our first investor, I think, or pre-seed investor. And the vision when we told it, which was completely insane, was that, yep, we're going to do mass adoption of psychedelic therapy as a first-line treatment. They're like, okay. But here we are. And our vision was always to essentially leverage existing incentives to create virtuous circles. And so we loved the idea that we were helping small businesses grow while delivering better care. And that's what we did at Journey. And so today we're the largest provider of psychedelic therapy in the world. We have delivered more than 1 million hours of ketamine-assisted therapy to date. %90 of our patients got better. 40% no longer meet diagnostic criteria. Yeah. And we had 0 real emergency events. And so we've progressed here from a small idea, and Rebecca can talk about it because she called me up one day and said, my malpractice insurance is letting me go. And I freaked out. But eventually, we take insurance in 30 states. We are their doctor. We train them. We're partnered with Compass Pathways and Healus and other drug developers. And we're starting to deliver Spravato, which we'll talk about, in non-Journey clinical owned practices. And so as we dawn on this wave of FDA approval, well, I think that this is going to be the way these drugs are delivered at scale and make people have healthy practices and businesses. So I'm super excited to be here with you. A lot of known faces and love that I'm meeting today. And I'm going to pass the baton to Greg.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Good to see everybody here this evening. My name's Greg. I am a investor and a podcast host. My fund, Psymed, invests in frontier brain and mental health technologies. And the podcast is called Business Trip. And yes, so I'm really excited about tonight because it's a really nice gathering of people that are clinicians, therapists, researchers, operators, and I think that's key in this field because it's so multidisciplinary, and so we're gonna have time for some Q&A at the end. And I think part of the impetus of this event was to have a conversation about the state of psychedelic therapy, and in particular because of the recent executive order, which everyone I speak to is like, I'm still trying to figure that out. So if that's you, you're not alone. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the existing bottlenecks that are in the system right now. And we're also going to talk about the opportunities. So I want to briefly allow our panelists, who are all luminaries in the field, to introduce themselves. Jonathan, I'm going to skip you because we don't have time. Rachel, please.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes. Thanks for coming. My name is Rachel Yehuda, and I am currently at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York. We started a few years ago a psychedelic center that is now called the Parsons Research Center for Psychedelic Healing. When I told my dean and chairman that that is what I wanted to do, they asked me if I was having a midlife crisis. And I said it didn't really matter. I probably was having a midlife crisis because I was getting pretty bored with what I was doing. Not that it wasn't going well, but that it wasn't really advancing care for people. This was a good opportunity. I've been at the VA for 30, 40 almost years, and I've recently retired. So I'm here because of that. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Love. I am Journey's first clinician member. And if you have been new to Journey ever, we might have met. I teach some classes for new incoming Journey clinicians. I teach at Fluence as well, and I have a CAP practice in Brooklyn where I have seen a pretty incredible growth and expansion of CAP, not only in my own practice, but across the country. So it's been pretty remarkable and exciting to have met Jonathan and Myriam and knocked on their door many moons ago and said, "Are you open yet? I really need you." And I'm very grateful to be here and be speaking to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Can you believe Rebecca was our first member? And we grew through 3,000 therapy practices that are actually doing ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in their own practice today. And this is why Jonathan and I created Journey Clinical, because we believe that these treatments need to be accessible to both clinicians and patients. And so we have created Journey Clinical, and one thing that's really important is that we're open in 30 states. We accept we're covered by major payers, and that means today, as a clinician or as a patient, you can do CAP. In the future, you'll be able to do psilocybin therapy, MDMA-assisted therapy, all through Journey Clinical. So we have been ready since 2021, and we can't wait for the future that is basically today and all of the recent developments that are happening at the federal levels and the FDA approvals that are coming through.
Okay, thank you. And Myriam, also congrats on becoming the new CEO of Journey Clinical. Very exciting. Okay, so let's start with the executive order, just to get that one out of the way. So in April, the president signed an executive order that really is a watershed moment in many ways, in my view, about psychedelic therapies. There's also some questions which we'll discuss too. Let me just briefly lay out what it is, and then we can have a little conversation about what it actually means. So there are a couple components of it that really fast track the review of psychedelics that are going through FDA. So in particular, companies that have breakthrough therapy designation, some of them will qualify for a priority voucher, which will fast track how long the review will be after they submit their new drug application. And it will fast track it from being 10 to 12 months to 1 to 2 months. So that is, I would say, pretty substantial to bring a drug to market faster. In addition to that, there is a provision on rescheduling, which basically says that if a company completes their phase 3 clinical trial, then they, if they're working with a class 1 substance, then the rescheduling sort of process initiates. And that is different than before, where you had to actually get approval. So again, it kind of kickstarts that momentum or that timing. In addition to that, there's a provision about what's called the Right to Try program. And so what that basically means is that for patients that have severe or terminal illnesses that have exhausted treatment, basically qualify to receive a psychedelic treatment that has phase 1 studies complete, so the safety data is there. And then one other provision that I think is notable is there's a $50 million federal grant from ARPA-H, which is the Health and Innovation Agency, to basically match state psychedelic initiatives. So that, I mean, there's some other stuff, but those are, I'd say, the bigger points that I wanted to highlight. So now the question is, all right, what does this actually mean? And so I think it could be interesting to give perspective from our different lenses for those who may want to share. And I'll just briefly kick it off from the investor standpoint. I think at a high level, this is a good thing, because it really, I think, changes some of the perception that many people have. Good is relative. Let's say good thing for psychedelic therapy, and that it is, changes perception and gives more validation to psychedelics as a class of drugs. Second thing I'll say is, from an investor standpoint, it definitely helps the, let's call it, risk-reward calculation you're making, in that there are some components of the process that are faster now, and also just getting more regulatory buy-in. However, I will say that there are also some components of it that are, let's call it unclear, or there's still uphill battles that exist. So for instance, the right to try side of things. You need a company, a sponsor, to actually offer the drug. And so, as far as I know, and I've been asking around, it's unclear which companies are actually going to decide to make their drug available if they have phase 1 data, for instance, to patients. So that still remains to be figured out what that means. It doesn't really, it's still very hard to get approval of a psychedelic. Like these trials are complicated. There's issues with blinding and biases. So that's still something that a lot of these companies need to navigate. And I would say, lastly, they don't really address like access and insurance and who's going to actually pay for these things. So it really, I would say, a lot of the focus is on the clinical trial process, but a bit less so about, okay, what happens afterwards. But I'm going to stop there. And if anyone else on the panel wants to chime in from your perspective, how you feel about it, your thoughts, mic is yours.
I feel like everybody's looking at me. I need to say something. I think I can talk about the access part, because especially for this audience and for the therapists that have been with Journey Clinical since 2021, a lot of therapists are asking, so what does this mean for us? Are we going to be able to do this in our own practice? And what we have been building at Journey Clinical since 2021 is really making sure that all therapists are equipped to do this in their own practice, including having access to a medical team, having access to training and education, having access to a community of like-minded professionals, as well as insurance coverage. And those really are the main pieces of infrastructure and care delivery that are necessary to make sure that patients can access these treatments through their therapists in their local communities. And so that's the question that we get every day. And at Journey Clinical, we have a partnership with Compass Pathways. And that means we have been working every week. Basically, we have a meeting with Compass Pathways to discuss the intricacies of care delivery, meaning who's going to be in the room and which insurance code are we going to use. And we have a full care delivery day coming up in about a month to discuss that in detail with Compass Pathways. That means we will be ready, as early as 2026, 2027, whenever FDA approval actually comes through, to deliver the logistics of all that's required for psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy. And I think one thing that's really important in the context of Journey Clinical is that we do that within the container of the Therapeutic Alliance and within preparation dosing integration, meaning we pair the psychedelic with psychotherapy.
Maybe if I can just add to that just a little bit. Sorry, Rachel, is it okay? And you can, yeah. So the other thing that's really shaping up to be likely, and we obviously can't share too many details because we're under NDA, but it's likely that something called REMS, which is essentially what the label requires as safety measures, is going to be quite close to what we're looking at with Spravato. And so for those of you who don't know what Spravato is, it is a version of ketamine called S-ketamine, delivered by Janssen, which has become a blockbuster drug. I think they're on track for $2 billion. $2 billion, so huge growth, and it is very efficacious. And that model requires a certain amount of monitoring, a doctor in the room, licensing. And so at Journey Clinical, so normally what people would do was build a clinic. What we were able to do at Journey was basically find a path that non-Journey Clinical owned sites have the proper approval to deliver Spravato in their practice and get fully covered by insurance. And so I'm sure Rachel will have a perspective, but likely if I were to give an advice to therapists, it is that to consider, for those of you who want to offer these treatments when they come to market, to start considering Spravato as an option. And we have the entire setup and have been doing it quite well. We actually have a representative now at Janssen that works with us.
Well, except for Journey, the rest of the world is not ready for this. And there are some real important barriers. People who are in clinical practice, with very minor exceptions, haven't worked with psychedelic compounds with patients out in the open and in a real-world medical setting. And so there are a lot of questions about how that gets accomplished. Do you do like a specialization, like you're going for a root canal, or is this your regular dentist? How often do you introduce a psychedelic, and what else do you have to do with it? One of the advantages of ketamine is that it takes about an hour or an hour and a half. But when we're talking about things like psilocybin or MDMA, that's your day. And it's an exhausting day, so you're not going to be able to squeeze in a patient in the morning or in the night. And all this monitoring, who's going to do it? It's expensive. And so I think that it's good signaling. It's really good for investors when there's anything from the executive that's positive. People react positively to that. And I think it is absolutely great that it happened. But I think that sometimes when these things happen, we don't get down to the nitty-gritty planning of it. If you're a community clinic, if you're a specialty that has been setting up and waiting for this day, you may have worked through for years some of the details. That's great. After a few years of experience running clinical trials, I can say that the therapy part is the treatment, and the drug is just helping.
Yeah, Rebecca, would you like to chime in?
I want to echo, as a psychotherapist, my deep, deep concerns with chipping away at the psychotherapeutic component that I think I would assume that all of us in this room hold very sacred. So in addition to the rollout that's going to take place legislatively, I foresee a very powerful role for us who are within the community, who do understand the nuances of these substances, who do understand this is not a drug like another Western medical intervention, and who are going to be the stewards and responsible for communicating to our client population what these things are and how we can use them skillfully, responsibly, ethically, and effectively.
Thank you. Myriam, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Maybe one thing that can be helpful, more conceptually in terms of the language that we use around psychedelic and psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. I think one learning that we had from MDMA was that FDA does not regulate psychotherapy. And so when we do go, and that's been the perspective from Compass, to get FDA approval for the drug. However, at Journey Clinical, what we've been committing to since literally the birth of the company has been to empower licensed mental health professional and to make sure that the way care is delivered is through licensed mental health professionals and through preparation, dosing, integration. So I want to make sure that you know, and Rebecca, of course you know because you've been doing this, that this is the path through which we're delivering these treatments at Journey Clinical. And I'm happy to share some more takeaways from Washington, D.C., actually, a little bit later.
I think it's about our messaging. And so if we call it psychedelic therapy, psychedelic assisted therapy, and we keep saying that. I mean, we're doing a study right now. I don't know if Enzo is here. He's one of the therapists. In our center, we're comparing ketamine in an infusion suite, the way Mount Sinai does it, and rolled it out and was actually one of the key inventors of the patent, versus ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, which is more like how you do it in our beautiful center, which is the right set and setting. And I don't know how many we've done, but enough to make a graph. It's very convincing. And what we have found is that at the end of the ketamine, people look the same. Meaning their symptoms for depression go down about the same amount, which is a lot. But what happens over time as you begin to assess people, a few weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, right? Until 2 months, is that the people who got the infusion their symptoms pop up again, right? But the people who had the ketamine-assisted psychotherapy are staying down. And that is I hope that this, I think it's going to last, right? I would like to live in a world where people will be much happier selling less drug and knowing that the outcomes of patients are stable and transformative. So,
Yeah.
I hope we're living in that world.
Yeah. Well, I think that's for many, it's the promise of psychedelic therapies, right? In that you can really get down to the root cause and work through it and get to not just baseline, but a place of flourishing. That was my own lived experience. So I think that's in many cases, it's kind of moving away from the SSRI antidepressant sort of for life paradigm. Let's move on to the meeting that Myriam, I believe Jonathan also, you attended last week in DC. Can you give us the scoop of what happened, what you learned, share it with all of us so we're all in the know?
First of all, there was air conditioning in the room. But as I shared, a couple people have asked me, what were the takeaways? And I think there are three.
What was happening as well?
Oh yes, of course. So the Psychedelic Medicine Coalition organized. It's a lobbying organization. Basically, organized a one-day federal summit with regulators. So representative from HHS, DARPA-H, the Senate, as well as operator, scientists, researchers. I think you were there. Jonathan was there. So every person who contributes to the field in a different way was represented through this day. And I think what was really interesting to me, which is what I shared, was what I realized was, we live a little bit in our bubble of ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in New York. But what I understood is there are so many people, and this is very much a bipartisan movement, that are actually trying to make progress that I had no idea about. And so I realized these people from the Senate were like all in and talking same with other parts of the government. And it was really for me the ability to realize, one, it takes a village, and you don't need to be great at everything. You can simply do your role really, really well and work in this multidisciplinary team to create some movement in the field. And I think that was my main learning, was the overwhelming amount of people that was engaged in wanting things to change and wanting to create that better world that you're talking about. That was my main takeaway. The second takeaway was, and this has come through the conversation a couple times, is we need language. We need to have language to be able to talk about this, because there are so many tensions, and we need to hold the tensions. We need to hold being bold and being thoughtful. We need to hold that we need more clinical research and we need access. And so I think there is something really powerful about needing to create common language so we can all talk about this. And then my last takeaway, which is very simple, is you can actually call your legislator. Like, I didn't know, but you can actually do that. And they're here and they want to hear from you and they will listen. So I wanted to share this with this group because this is what I walked away with.
Okay. Any other takeaways that anyone? No? Okay. We'll keep moving. So we're kind of talking about this next couple of years of potential approvals for other compounds. What can clinicians, practitioners, therapists, what can they do to prepare for it? Like, what should people in this room be doing, thinking about? Jonathan, you had touched on Spravato as one sort of, gateway to that. Anything else come to mind?
Spravato. I mean, it's Spravato. Because basically we've got 3,000 people. I mean, Rachel's standard is the best. It's the gold standard. But realistically, for this to be accessible to everybody, it's Spravato. And who pays for the therapist to be part of the insurance coverage? It will be the insurer if they're a monitor. And so we can work into having that model there. So I've been looking at this for a while. Our plan was always to partner with drug developers to understand what would be the way to do it. We had so many answers of people saying, you're never going to be able to do this with your model. And so we worked very hard to figure it out. And so that's what I would really advise, is essentially start doing Spravato in your practice, integrate the therapy portion because that you have the opportunity to. It's fully covered by insurance. And it is, in my opinion, the closest you can get to what are going to be the requirements for these drugs.
Don't get me wrong, there's no one more excited about psychedelics, really, I think. Certainly not at Mount Sinai, I'll tell you that. But I am also really understanding the weight of it. and the need for us to be very responsible. We're holding this, not the drug companies, not Congress, not the executive. It's us. We're the ones that are interfacing with the patient, and really the buck begins and stops there. So we have to educate ourselves about how to work with this, but we also have to exercise the restraint around when and how to use these therapies. I believe I'm speaking to a room of clinicians. I might not say that in a different context.
Rebecca, how are you preparing for what's next?
Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate what you're saying. And the way that I'm thinking about this, and again, I'll also recognize that I'm speaking to a room of clinicians who have been using CAP. So you know how to present this intervention. You know how to really emphasize the role of preparation and integration. You know how to upend the notion of a Western medical intervention and emphasize participation in the treatment as being critical to its success. The other thing I want to say is that we're working now with ketamine, which works on people's systems for 45 minutes, an hour and a half. It is kind of an excellent bite-sized chunk for someone whose system cannot manage a more intense disruption. And so, especially because they get to have a little nibble and then go out and be in their lives and titrate the experience appropriately. How many of us have sat with someone who has been in a ceremonial experience or an underground experience and came back saying, I was flooded. I was not aware of my choice. I was not aware of my agency. And the issue, the trauma, persists. It gets bigger. It gets more complicated. So ketamine, in my mind, is actually a really beautiful kind of gateway, if you will, if it feels appropriate. The other thing that I want to emphasize a lot is we are training people how to find their embodied sense of consent. And as many of us know, as trauma therapists, this is a very complex process. People who have been socialized and traumatized into saying yes when they mean no. And so part of what we're doing in these smaller, more manageable contexts is really getting granular about how people feel their sense of consent, how they know it's a yes for me, and then allowing them in this modality with Journey. What's so beautiful about it is you get to choose every step along the way. You get to choose your dose. I mean, you can't exceed the dose that's prescribed, but you can go anywhere under it that you want. You get to choose when. You get to choose the environment. You get to choose whether you want this or another route of administration for ketamine. So we are harnessing our skill set in conjunction with the client's system to really teach and train. And so I think actually our clients who have been doing ketamine, a lot of them will understand how to find that sense within themselves once more involved and sometimes arduous interventions become available. And then the other thing is that because people are doing this work within community, as they will with these other interventions, they're not going to the jungle, they're not going to another place where cultural context is just completely different. They are building a more robust community along the way. And that's our job as well, to help them find the community that supports them. And if it's not the one that they exist within now, our job as clinicians is to really encourage them to seek out supportive communities so that they have that once their systems are upended, maybe even more through these other more involved interventions.
Rebecca, just one follow-up. Are you seeing any difference in adherence based on the dose, like lower dose, higher dose experience that you're offering? Adherence just to the sticking with it for a longer period. Well,
I am like psycholytic robust. So I am a big fan of the lower doses so that I can continue working in a more relational way with the clients. I respect all manner of dosing, but I really, really appreciate working in that way. And because I think because of that, it is easier when somebody's able to dialogue with you for them to find that embodied agency that I'm talking about, and then be more encouraged, I think, to continue on this path.
Jonathan.
Yeah, maybe just one answer to your question. Sorry. Congrats. Thank you. Is we've seen over 1 million hours of ketamine therapy, and so the 90% that get better, and the difference between the 90% that show improvement in their outcomes and those who stick to the 8-course treatment that we recommend, there's a 30% improvement when they do stick with the treatment. So I personally think, for instance, that treatment adherence in general is one of the biggest problems in healthcare today. And we've been working with our therapists a lot to say, why is it a good idea to finish the treatment we recommend? It doesn't mean forever, but it does mean going through a process that doesn't always move quickly and that doesn't always resolve as quickly as we would. And so we've seen clear data that does prove that adhering to a protocol improves outcomes.
Okay, so we have time for 2 questions.
So I'm curious, you talk about expense. So you talk about the expense and insurance and so on. You're seeing this uptick of loneliness, particularly in older people. Is there any Medicare, Medicaid coverage for ketamine treatment?
I can talk through this. So currently, Journey Clinical is in network with providers, such as Aetna, etc. We are working through Medicaid and Medicare. So we're today not covered, but we're actually working through this. And we do expect that to be available. I also do know that for Spravato, Spravato is covered by Medicaid, Medicare too, I believe. So, yes.
Yes.
What is the advantage of encouraging one of your clients, one of your patients to do Spravato versus ketamine? Why all of a sudden Spravato everywhere, other than another business investment opportunity, which I don't dismiss because I'm an investor in the field, but I'm just curious. I don't know a lot about that drug.
Do you want to take it or should I could talk to that. Our goal at Journey was to democratize access to psychedelic therapy responsibly. That was our plan. Our assumption was that having people, like we have on this panel, who are, clinicians and licensed and trained and experienced would be the best path to do so, right? And so why Spravato? It's a very good question. Is it better than ketamine? Not necessarily. They're very close in terms of compounds, really. However, what it is likely is that we want, to the point of Rachel, to the point of Rebecca, have these treatments delivered by people who understand how to deliver this care and when to deliver this care. So we've built the largest network in the world of people experienced in this for the past 7 years. And now we want them to be the first to be the pioneers on the new drugs because they're basically already been doing it, right? So empowering them to add Spravato to their practice and combining them and keeping the Journey clinical model will create readiness for new drugs instead of having some large clinic deliver it like it's at scale, right? So we're essentially all trying to do a version of the same thing. We're trying to empower small businesses to be able to also deliver them, and it's going to be faster and more accessible and covered by insurance.
So insurance is really
It's insurance, but it's also risk and and requirements, on-label requirements. So we're basically prepping them to be ready from a FDA requirement perspective and be covered by insurance.
All right, I'm going to give a closing thought, which is when you think about it, like what's really happening right now is trying to bring psychedelic compounds and psychedelic therapies to market in a responsible way. And this is kind of like our second shot, right? You could argue that, at least in the West, right? It was what happened in the 60s, 70s. I wasn't there for it. I've studied it pretty extensively. It was, the molecules left the, what's the phrase? The molecules left the classroom, the right, the stage. And so I think right now this is definitely on like hard mode of getting this right, in that we're literally needing to deal with a government and a whole bureaucratic apparatus to deliver the stuff safely to patients and do it at scale. So I want to just acknowledge that this is like a really Herculean hard thing that's going on. There will probably be some bumps along the way. I think that's inevitable and psychedelic in nature in and of itself. But at the same time, I think that frankly, it's like gatherings like this and folks like this that are coming together to like actively problem solve and call your senator and honestly just advocate for the way that you think this needs to be done responsibly, because we're all figuring it out as we go, and nobody has all the answers. And I think that there's clearly momentum right now, and so I think it's really a matter of just getting different perspectives and operating, scaling at the speed of trust is the way I like to think about it. So that wraps up this panel. Thank you everybody for coming. And we'll be hanging out. So thank you.